He's not just an actor. He's also a director. He's also a producer. He's also a writer. And more importantly to me, he's an educator, first and foremost. So with that, LeVar. So let's kick it right off with a question here, right out of the box. LeVar, you were actually born on a U.S. Army base in Germany. Talk a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing.
Wow. I was born in what used to be called West Germany. It's all just Germany now. Being a military brat, an Army brat, was, I think, the best childhood I could possibly have had. Being born in a foreign country, going back for another tour of duty when I was in the 3rd and the 4th grade, really growing up in an environment where change was constant, really prepared me for the life that I lead now. I grew up in a house with a woman who was a teacher, an educator, and later in her life, her second career was as a social worker. It is my mother from whom I get my love of the written word. My mother always, and continues to always have several books going for her own personal enjoyment. I like to say that in my mother's house, you either read a book or you got hit in the head with one. She really wasn't particular what your choice was, but you were going to have an encounter with literature in Irma Jean's household. And whenever I speak in front of people, I always love to mention my mother's name, Irma Jean Christian. I feel like I am the man that I am because she is the woman that she is.
Well, you mentioned your mother as an obvious inspiration. Who were some of your other inspirations growing up?
When I was a kid, I read a lot of biographies of saints. I was raised a Catholic, not because my mother was Catholic. She was raised in the fundamentalist Baptist tradition of my grandmother. My mother, as an educator, knew that the best education available for me was a parochial school, private school education. So I read a lot of biographies of saints. It seemed to me that, in retrospect, I was really looking for clues as to how ordinary people came to live extraordinary lives. And their stories are what always fascinated me. And I see myself today, you introduced me as an educator, a director, a producer, but in my view, I'm mostly a student more than anything else. So even my Twitter handle is actor, director, educator, student.
That's great. When did you know you wanted to be an actor in life, and what drove you into that aspect in college?
Boy, this is a long story, Tony. I studied for the priesthood earlier in my life. I entered the Catholic seminary when I was 13. And boy, the journey from the priesthood to acting is not as long a journey as you would think. I used to, as a seminarian, have a recurring dream of my first sermon as an ordained priest. And the setting always changed. Sometimes it was in a large cathedral, sometimes it was in a very small parish church. But the theme that the dream had in common was consistently I was really making contact with the congregation, really providing something of value in that moment of connection. And I think that as an actor, I've had an opportunity to really do that, to really connect with people and to hopefully bring something of value to the moment of connection. And I think that's what I would like to have done as a priest as well. Yeah.
Well, your acting debut that we're all familiar with would have been in the movie TV series Roots.
Mm-hmm. How many have seen Roots?
Okay, good. Quite a few of you.
Yeah. How many have read the book? That's a fair number.
For today
impressed.
Especially.
Yeah.
For which you were nominated for an Emmy Award, may I throw in, when you were very, very young. How do you think that movie impacted the American landscape at the time it was released?
Wow. In several ways. Roots had tremendous impact, not across a lot of different fields, sociologically. Roots was an early example of the novelization for television, actually bringing huge literary works to the television screen in installments. They did the Thornbirds like that, Winds of War, all kinds of terrific examples of literature novelized for television. So it was pretty important in that respect. The record numbers that watched Roots. Roots, when it aired in an era before the advent of the VCR and the DVR. There was no way to record and watch later. So this nation watched Roots together every single night, 8 consecutive nights of television, and then it became the conversation the next day around the water cooler, on college campuses, at high schools. So it was the national conversation. We watch television in such a fractured manner these days, on our own time, on our own schedule. But it was a communal event. Everyone was involved in the watching of the Roots and the experience of really reframing our idea of slavery in America and that very critical chapter in American history. Prior to Roots, slavery was generally talked about in a paragraph or two in American history, and it was generally referred to as an economic institution that allowed America to rise to the stature of world leader that it has. Roots put a face on the institution of slavery. Through the telling of his family's story, Alex Haley was able to give us a sense of just how universal humanity is, and that the ideals of freedom and the indomitability of the human spirit, these are ideals and values that we all have in common. And in the telling of that story, he was really able to have a major impact on how we see ourselves as a nation. I believe that there is a through line that goes from the reconstruction of the South post-Civil War and the migration of populations from the South to the North and the West. My family is a product of that migratory movement through the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, Roots in the 70s, and Barack Obama being elected president. None of those events happens absent the one before it. So Roots is part of a continuum of energy that really does express the movement of America.
Who do you think most influenced your acting career?
Wow. Well, I remember being pretty young, 6, 7, going to the drive-in with my parents and seeing Sidney Poitier in Lilies of the Field at a drive-in movie. I thought he was like a superhero to me. Sidney. Yeah, if you haven't seen Lilies of the Field, it's a simple little movie, and Sidney Poitier won the Academy Award, first time a man of African-American descent, or African descent. He's actually Afro-Caribbean. He's from the islands, Sidney. But he was a god to me. I admire him tremendously. Yay for Sidney.
Yay for Sidney. Okay, so you began hosting and producing Reading Rainbow on PBS in 1983.
June of 1983 was the first episode of Reading Rainbow, yeah.
Now, the series ran for 23 years, won dozens of Emmys. You yourself won 12 of them, and you touched a ton of children. What was your passion surrounding this? Well,
nothing happens by accident in my view of the world. I don't believe that there is such thing as capricious events in our lives. So the Roots experience for me on a personal level was one of awakening. It was in itself a rite of passage. I was 19 years old and a sophomore
And you were nominated for an Emmy for it.
Yeah, on the cover of Time magazine at the age of 19. So it was really an initiatory experience that I went through in the 19th year of my life. It was one of those sink or swim moments. My very first day as a professional actor, Cicely Tyson played my mother. Dr. Maya Angelou played my grandmother. I was working with professionals that I had admired my entire life. And the task was to act as if I belonged there, you know? And so the idea that I could, through something that I absolutely loved, I loved the theater, I loved theater arts, I loved acting and the opportunity to express myself in that way, that it could sustain me in some way, that it could really feed me, was tremendously exciting. And it was also very scary. Because I was literally thrust into the big leagues from obscurity. So that experience was really sort of critical and set the tone for the rest of my life, really, in terms of my ability to weather storms and adapt to extreme change. Again, you know, nothing happens accidentally. That early life as sort of a nomad in a military family, it gave me that flexibility to really adapt to extreme change and fluctuation. So in many ways, I felt like I had been preparing for Kunta my entire life.
You know, so your passion for Reading Rainbow, it was...
Oh, so to answer your question, right, you asked about Reading Rainbow. Yeah, I sort of got sidetracked. So it was the Roots experience that really showed me the power of the medium of television. I was an Army brat. I mean, I spent time in Europe. I grew up in the age of television, but was not an avid television watcher. I mean, not like kids these days are, and the generation that we actually created Reading Rainbow for. So Roots was, again, a real initiatory experience for me in that I really discovered the sheer power of the entertainment medium and television specifically, because we invite those stories into our homes, into our hearts. And when it was suggested to me that there was an opportunity to use this very powerful medium to steer children back in the direction of literature and the written word, it was as if two of my lives, my life as a bookworm and my life as an actor, those two pathways were coming together in a single event. And it just made great sense to me.
Yeah, a couple days ago, you and I were talking about the power of storytelling. How do you think the power of storytelling influences a child's, or even an adult's passion for creativity and innovation?
I was having this conversation with a young man today, the reporter for your paper here at DMAC. Literature and our connection to the written word is nothing short, in my view, of that which connects us to the thing that makes us most unique as human beings, and that is the power of our imagination. Human beings have an ability, it's like a superpower, really, that we have, that no other species on this planet possesses, in as much as we can imagine, through our imaginations, we can create an image or a feeling of a non-localized event. We can project ourselves in time and space through our imaginations, and no other creature can do that. I believe that literature is the key. Our relationship to the written word is the key that sort of unlocks that power and gets us to exercise it and get really good at exercising our imagination. And for me, I love reading science fiction literature when I'm reading for pleasure, because science fiction literature invites us into the process of imagining what I believe to be are two of the most important words in combination in language. What if? What if? In science fiction literature, we are asked to contemplate the what if. And I believe that there is a direct link between that which we focus our imaginations on and that which we manifest in the world. And you only have to look as far as Star Trek to see the correlation between that which we imagine and focus on and that which we create, from the Bluetooth earpiece, which is Lieutenant Uhuru's listening device, to the tablet computer, the flip cell phone, which was Kirk's communicator. We're, through geosynchronous systems architecture, looking at the power of computers being gathered together in real time to create experiences that, like the holodeck, that really require that much sort of crunching of ones and zeros in a phenomenally fast manner in real-time calculations. So the link is inextricable between that which we focus our attention on, that which we focus our imaginations on, and that which we create in life.
Okay, now we'll get to Star Trek here in a while. For 23 years, you read to children. Would you like to take a minute and read out of your book to us?
Who wants to hear a story?
This is your book, so you should have it memorized, I'm guessing, but here. You can read directly from it so it looks like you're really reading.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. But I really didn't think about the logistics of this.
No, we didn't.
But, so, a little bit about The Rhino Who Swallowed a Storm. I'm enormously proud of it. First, I have to point out that my co-writer, Susan Schaefer-Bernardo, was a dream to work with, as was our illustrator, Courtney Fletcher. I come from a background where artistic endeavor is best experienced as a collaborative effort. And for this, my second book, I wrote a sort of a dystopian, post-apocalyptic look at a future many years ago, and that was a solitary effort. But for this, I knew I couldn't draw, and I was going to need to collaborate with someone, and the illustrator, Courtney Fletcher, came along with a writing partner, and it didn't take me long to recognize the value that she could bring to the process. So The Rhino Who Swallowed a Storm is a book that I believe my friend and mentor, Fred Rogers, might have written had he been around for the times in which we live today, with school shootings and theater shootings and natural disasters of every kind and wars being fought on so many fronts. Our children are living in a world that is dominated by the actions of adults, and I wanted to create a resource for kids and for their families to give us an opportunity to, through literature, deal with the disappointments that life can sometimes bring through tragedy, and that tragedies are natural occurrences in the expression of life, and that there's always a way to recover, and that recovery really comes through our connection with others. So that is the background.
I can hold your mic for you when I read.
Yeah. So the story begins as a story within a story, because I also wanted to write it with the visuals and the digital realm in mind. In the middle of the morning, Mika Mouse trembled under her blanket. A storm boomed outside of her window, and rain crashed against the glass. Wind rattled the shutters. More than anything else, Mika was afraid of storms. A year before, a powerful hurricane had destroyed her home. "I'm scared, Papa," she said. That's Mika there. Her father's reading the Gouda Times. "We are safe, Mika. This storm will pass soon," said Papa. "Would you like for me to read you a story? I know just the one to make you feel better." Mika loved books, and Papa's gentle voice soothed in a way that made her forget all about the thunder. Papa opened the book and began. "Long, long ago, before there were words, animals roamed in bountiful herds. Little Rhinoceros lived happy and free, exploring mountains and meadows, rivers and trees. His world was delightful, and chock full of magic until, out of the blue, that magic turned tragic. A storm swept through the valley, turning bright sky to black. A flash flood came raging, no time to react. Lost in the thundering, no time for wondering. Chaos and lightning, fury so frightening. Earth quaking, him shaking, water rumbling, him tumbling. Raggedy, jaggedy, senseless calamity. The storm crashed through his world and tore it apart and took away everything dear to his heart. Rhino was stunned by the terrible scene. Death and destruction all through the ravine. Enraged by the pain of such a great loss, Rhino acted without a thought to the cost. Rhino looked at his world all tattered and torn, stood out on the ledge, and swallowed the storm.
Now, for the rest of that, you have to go buy the book. Okay, so Reading Rainbow went off the air a while ago, but you recently did something pretty spectacular to revive the program's future. You want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, my business partner Mark Wolf and I, in 2009, when Reading Rainbow went off the air, PBS sort of took it out of the ready-to-learn lineup, which is the sort of early childhood education core programming for PBS. We saw it as an opportunity, and we spent a year and secured the rights to the brand. And then in 2012, we launched the Reading Rainbow app. We reinvented what was a television show as a tablet experience for kids. It was a daunting task. There were many opportunities to really mess it up. And in the end, I think we really got it right. I'm really, really proud of the app. We are the #1 educational app for the iPad in the iStore.
I think we have a shot here of the app coming up here right next.
Do you? Yeah. So the concept is that you are the pilot of your own hot air balloon, and you're in the cockpit there. You can, through the islands in the sky, you can go there and search for books and video field trips. Those are the two areas of content that we deal in that come directly from the television show itself. Reading Rainbow was all about the books and connecting that literature to real-world experience so that kids could get an idea that the world is a place of vast experience, and they could find some of that experience that they could connect to. And so the video field trip is a really important part of what we do. So kids search out through the islands in the sky, an island that they want to go. They'll find books there that they want to read, that they can self-select, and video field trips to go along with it.
What kind of impact would you like to see Reading Rainbow have of the future on children?
Well, like the television show, I think that we have had a hand in raising a generation or more of people who feel a personal connection to literature, to books and the written word, and they feel that connection very personally, and it's a relationship that's very much alive in their everyday lives. I'm enormously proud of that, certainly, as a reader myself and as someone who recognizes the value that books have brought into my life. Going forward, I recognize that our educational system is not doing the job that it used to do in terms of giving in a public educational environment a well-rounded human being as the result. And I believe that a relationship with the written word is an absolutely essential part of what makes a successful educational experience. And so we are creating, due to the Kickstarter campaign that we waged, we're creating opportunities to bring Reading Rainbow into the classroom with a Reading Rainbow EDU product.
And that Kickstarter campaign raised $5.4 million?
It raised 5.4 on Kickstarter, and then Seth MacFarlane gave us $1 million, and so we
100,000 investors, right? Something like that.
106,000 investors, which is a record. It's the most people who have ever contributed to a crowdfunding campaign in America.
You know, you mentioned Seth MacFarlane giving $1 million. How do you think Hollywood views the mission of education, or is that not their responsibility?
I don't think Hollywood thinks about it, generally speaking.
Why is it?
I don't know why that is. Again, the Roots experience is one that showed me that if you do your job right, you can do more than just entertain, that you can really move the needle in terms of social consciousness, in terms of information, enlightenment. I believe that we have the ability. Look, moving pictures and sound is the most powerful way of communicating to human beings because we are physiologically predisposed to want to take in storytelling through as many of our senses as we possibly can. And the best method we've come up with so far is moving pictures and sound. It just really works for the human animal. And I personally believe that I am responsible for all of the content that I produce. And that goes from movies to television to tweets. I take personal responsibility for that which I produce. I recognize that I live and work in an environment where the profit motive is the primary driver for most people, and I am not allergic to money. And I feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to do my absolute best to bring engaging and enriching content to the table. That's just me. That's just my point of view. I can't speak for the rest of Hollywood. We're really good at storytelling, and like I believe very, very, at the very center of my being, that all media is educational. The question is, what are we teaching?
Okay. Okay, so how did the iconic phrase, "but you don't have to take my word for it," come about?
It was in the very first script, and it just stuck, you know? Something like that. It wasn't planned to become a catchphrase. It was just a way of expressing in the introduction of the book reviews on Reading Rainbow, where we gave children an opportunity to review books themselves, books that they themselves had read. It was just the host's way of expressing, but you don't have to take my word for it that this is a good book. You listen to these kids who have read the books themselves. And it's sort of for, again, a whole generation of adults now who grew up on the show, it has a double meaning. Yes, don't take anybody's word for it. Be responsible for your own investigation into the world and pick up a book and take a look. I mean, you have the power yourself of discovery. I believe that every human being has a God-given inalienable right to be literate in at least one language, because if you can read in at least one language, you are the definition of free, in my view. You have the ability to educate yourself. An educated human being is the most dangerous animal on the planet. And when I say dangerous, I mean dangerous to those that would want to thwart your ability to express as an individual your freedom of thought.
Okay, in 2012, Jimmy Fallon did a impersonation of Jim Morrison and the Doors, singing the theme song to Reading Rainbow. I think we have a clip. What was your thought when you first saw it?
How freaking cool.
I thought it was one of the best things he's ever done.
Well, again, Jimmy is from that generation. He and his sister Gloria watched Reading Rainbow as kids. He's a phenomenally talented guy. We actually launched the Reading Rainbow app on the Jimmy Fallon Show. The first time an app had ever been introduced on nighttime television. It won't be the last time, believe you me, but it was the first. And Jimmy was responsible for inviting us on to his show in order to make that happen.
Okay, so reading is very, very important to you. What is your favorite book?
Whatever book I happen to be reading at any given time.
No favorite. No one book stands out.
Oh, there are lots that stand out, but you know, a favorite book of all time? I mean, that's a really tough one to answer. I'll refer to Captain's Courageous, Rudyard Kipling. Not a great book, necessarily, but it was the book that I was reading when I got what reading was all about. At the end of that book, I turned the last page, closed the cover, and then got profoundly sad. I know now that it was depression. I didn't then. I got sad because I was leaving this world that I had completely immersed myself in. I had lived with these characters and gone on that adventure with them, and now it was over, and it was devastating. And that's when the light bulb went off for me. I was like, oh, this is it. This is what my mother's been urging me towards all of this time. To this day, when I'm reading a particularly good piece of fiction, I slow down those last couple of chapters because I know that sadness, that depression is going to here it's coming. I just want to forestall it as long as I can.
This show, Reading Rainbow, has touched so many people. Do you have a story of any particular feedback from a parent or a child that you want to share? Not really one in particular, Tony, but there is not a day in my life when someone doesn't approach me and say, I became a writer and Reading Rainbow had a huge influence on me. I learned English as a second language, and Reading Rainbow really helped me learn the language when I came to this country. Or I'm a beekeeper, for goodness sakes, because of the episode of Reading Rainbow. I flew a plane for the first time. I learned to scuba dive. I've met phenomenal people, and in the process of telling these stories and sharing these stories with kids for all of these years, my life has been immeasurably enriched. And that's an absolute metaphor for having a personal relationship with literature. By engaging yourself, your imagination in the pages of a good book, the gifts that you give with your time and energy and attention are enormously returned 10, 20-fold in the richness that is sent back in your direction. I can fully understand that because we have students come back all the time from here that have gone on and done great things, and it makes you feel really special.
Absolutely.
Who do you most admire in life, and why?
My mother's the strongest human being I know. She raised 3 children as a single parent while working full-time as a social worker and going to night school and getting a graduate degree, a master's degree, master's in social work. When I first got to USC, the University of Southern California, I was on a full scholarship. My mother worked nights waiting tables in a bar so I could go to college. She is, as I say, the strongest woman I've ever met. She's the pinnacle in my view as someone to admire and emulate.
Okay, your mother can't be part of this dinner. If you had to pick 3 other people in the world to have dinner with, any 3 people ever, time doesn't matter, forward, backwards, who would they be?
Martin Luther King.
And myself, right?
Ernest Hemingway. Wow. I'll save that 3rd slot for a last-minute entry.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your time on Star Trek: Next Generation,
Yay.
where you played Joy LaForge. Take a minute, talk about just your experience with that entire series and what it meant for you.
Well, Star Trek: The Next Generation was the best 7 years of my life as an actor. We had so much fun making that show. And there's something really extraordinary about the relationship that we all share. We tend to make one another laugh more than anyone else in our respective lives. And when we are together, it's like, Star Trek: The Next Generation is like our high school. It's like where we all came together and discovered ourselves through each other. And I genuinely believe that the relationship that we express was discernible. You could really feel it in the episodes. I get the sense that people began to care about us because at its core, we really cared about one another, and people tuned in, episode after episode, to see how these people who cared about each other were dealing with, the extraordinary circumstances that they continue to find themselves in. When I got married many years ago, my best man was Brent Spiner, and my groomsmen were Michael Dorn, Jonathan Frakes, and Patrick Stewart. So you can imagine how kick-ass my wedding photos are.
What was it like working with Gene Roddenberry on Star Trek? I mean, he's an amazing, imaginative visionary. How was that?
Gene was that, amazing and imaginative and a visionary. And I was very much in awe of him. I've had 3 storytelling mentors in my life. Alex Haley, certainly. And Alex is really a man who taught me the importance and necessity of being really genuine. Alex Haley was the sort of human being, he could be in a crowd of people, but talking to you, and you got the sense that there was nobody else in the universe that was more important than you in that moment. He was never looking over your shoulder to see who else came in the room that he wanted to have a conversation with. Gene taught me that all of our heroes are human. I really revered Gene Roddenberry and still do to this day. And Gene taught me a lot about the paradox of being human. Gene was a visionary, and yet all of the women in Star Trek wore short skirts. Right? He was a man of his time, of his generation. He was a pilot. He was a cop. He drank heavily. And he loved the ladies. And so it really became important for me to reconcile the 2 different genes that I came to know. And at the end of the day, I had to recognize that is just the paradox of being human, that we are a combination of things, and we are all, none of us, one thing. There is a lot that goes into the makeup of a human being, and we're incredibly complex and oftentimes contradictory in nature, and that's just part of the game.
I want to read this because I want to make sure I get this right. But one of his greatest visions was inclusiveness in the future. So you had people of all races, you had all genders, you had people with varying interests who are all coming together for the sake of humanity in general.
Absolutely.
In fact, most people don't know that on the original series, the very, very first interracial kiss was on Star Trek,
right,
between Kirk and Uhura. We showed that picture on the screen there. Talk about this inclusive theme and what it meant to you in this show.
There is an acronym, IDIC, I-D-I-C, Infinite Diversity and Infinite Combination, and that's really one of the cornerstones of the Star Trek universe, and the importance that we have respect for all of that diversity of life that exists in the galaxy, or all of the galaxies. Gene was able to paint a picture of a future that I definitely wanted to live in. As a black kid growing up in the 60s and the 70s, it was not always comfortable or fun to be me. Generally, I was one of very few people of color in whatever situation I was in, school or scouts or whatever social situation I found myself in. And I read a lot of science fiction books as a kid. It was Gene's vision that really drew me in, because it was a vision where I saw myself represented. As far as Gene was concerned, when the future came, there was a place for me, and that wasn't always the truth in the pages of those science fiction novels that I read as a kid. So the idea of diversity and inclusion, that infinite diversity of life and the infinite combinations, and the importance of drawing on all of that diversity to create the right team, it was a vision that I wholly embraced because it embraced me.
Okay, creativity and innovation, which is what this event is all about.
Sure.
You know, was clearly a part of Star Trek. Very much so. And not only in a thematic sense, but also in a practical sense of getting the show made. Making the show was like making almost a mini movie every time. Talk a little bit about the process of what it took to get a typical episode made.
Pattern for Star Trek, and when I say pattern, the budget, by the time we finished, was about a 1.9 million an episode. And a good deal of that was in the visual effects and the makeup. Star Trek would not have been what it was without the makeup genius of Michael Westmore. The man is responsible for every alien ever created on Next Gen. And yeah, absolutely. Again, I spoke earlier about the collaborative nature of making movies and television, and nowhere was it ever on better display than at Star Trek. The visual effects artists, the costume designers, set designers, Herman Zimmerman, our production designer, Bob Blackman, our chief costumer. These are tremendously talented people. The prop makers, everybody. See, the thing about making movies is you have all of these experts in their various fields of art and craft, and then everybody brings their best effort to the table. And with each layer, the thing that you're making gets better and better and better, and then they give the director credit for it, which is crazy, but it's true. The job of director, in my view, is as much about leadership as it is about vision. For me, if you can communicate your vision to an army, and it's literally an army of people, it's like about 100, 120, 130 people on a set every day. If you can get that army to move in a singular direction under your vision, I believe you are well positioned to really do good things. I believe if you respect them, if you give them the opportunity to do their best work, they will. And then if you feed them right, if you feed them well, because movie sets move on their stomach. Yeah.
We recently lost another Trek icon this last week, Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. How do you think he personally impacted the franchise?
Leonard was the Vulcan who had the biggest heart. He was, you know, that part of ourselves that is always looking for expression. He was the outsider who knew more about us than we knew about ourselves. Leonard was a really wonderful human being, and I don't think he ever could have played Spock the way he did if he wasn't that big of a heart. He was tremendously generous. He was funny. He was warm. He was charming. He was a good man. He was a good man.
For all 7 years on television, and then for some of the movies, you had to wear that visor.
Oy.
How was that?
It was a pain in the ass.
Wasn't that like a women's hair thing or something?
It was designed, the visor was designed on a banana clip, yeah. A woman's hair retention device.
Yeah.
See, the thing that you don't realize is that we screwed the visor into my head. There are flanges on the inside of the visor, and on top of the flanges are the female end of screws. And in the visor box, wooden box with a mirror in the lid, that Charlie Russo, the prop master, would bring to me every time I put the visor on, there were the two male parts of the screw, and the ends were octagonal, and they fit in, and one turned clockwise, the other turned counterclockwise, and by turning the screws, I was pushing the flanges up against the temples in my head, and then the orange, what we called blinkies, they're just little magnets that went on the outside. So I literally cranked that puppy down on my head every time I put it on. And there was a piece of double-faced tape there on the bridge of my nose and double-faced tape on the temples. And so after about a half an hour, 40 minutes tops, I'd get a bit of a headache and I'd need to come out of it. because it was just, that uncomfortable.
Well, it is too bad the writers decided to wait to like second to last movie to have you get rid of it.
It was a condition. Look, Rick Berman always insisted, and I don't disagree with him, that the visor for the casual fan of Star Trek was a shorthand way of communicating the technological sophistication of the 24th century that we were dealing in. And I always maintain, well, if we're so damn technologically sophisticated, why don't we just do an ocular implant? Which we finally did.
You talked about the production of Star Trek earlier, and you did some directing yourself. You directed more episodes than any other actor, about 30 of them. How different was it on the other side of the camera? And what kept you coming back to it?
I love directing. What kept me coming back to it was the opportunity to tell stories from a different perspective, a different point of view. As an actor, you lead a pretty self-centered, narcissistic existence. You look at a script and, you're sort of searching for, bullshit, oh, my line, bullshit, oh, my line, that's good. As a director, you really have to be responsible for telling the entire story. And like I said, coordinating the talents and the efforts of a team of people, of an army of people, and it really is it's an awful lot of fun.
Which episode are you most proud of?
Oh boy, again, most proud. I don't know. One that stands out is certainly my first episode as a director, Second Chances. And that was really trial by fire. I had 2 Commander Rikers in that episode, and so I really had to figure out how to shoot those scenes where I had both Commander Rikers in the same frame. And yeah, there were a lot of, the visual effects team was there to help, but I really had to figure out what I wanted to see and how I wanted to accomplish it. And then, it was their job to make sure that I captured the correct elements. That was enormously challenging, and I hardly slept during the 8 days we shot that episode, and when we finished shooting that episode, I couldn't wait to do it again. And I knew that I had found a new passion, something else that caused me to want to get up in the morning.
Okay, you were the chief engineer of the Starship Enterprise. Look over there real quick. Who wins this battle between a Star Wars Death Destroyer, Star Destroyer, and the Enterprise?
No contest. It's the Enterprise.
When you look back on your career and think back to your early days of acting and learning to be an actor in school, if you had known you were going to become an iconic Star Trek, person or an actor, how would have you thought that back then? I thought about that back then.
It would have paralyzed me. Again, I was a huge fan of the original series. Seeing Nichelle Nichols on the bridge of the original Enterprise was hugely important to me. I grew up in an era where it was very rare to see black people on television. It was a big deal to see Sammy Davis Jr. on The Rifleman. It was a big deal to see Clarence Williams III on The Mod Squad. It was a big deal to see Diane Carroll as Julia, the title character in her own television series. It was a big deal to see Nichelle Nichols on the bridge of the Enterprise. It was really extraordinary. It was out of the ordinary. So I couldn't possibly have contemplated growing up and becoming a part of that storytelling mythos. It was too grand a dream to have dreamt at that part of my life.
If there was something in your life that you've learned today or now that you could go back and tell yourself way early on in your career, what would it have been?
Wow. It's all going to be all right. It's all going to work out okay. Don't waste a lot of energy in anxiety. Just put one foot in front of the other. I've come to learn in my life that walking is a great metaphor for life, because like life, walking is a controlled fall. As human beings, when we walk, we have a natural tendency to throw that other leg out there. Otherwise, we'd fall flat on our face. So it really is a controlled fall that we're doing, and we control it with our ambulation. When you're walking, you don't necessarily need to know what the next step is. The most important thing is to take the step that's in front of you. And it really has become my metaphor for living, because it doesn't matter if you know the end of the chapter that you're living. It's not necessary to know the end of the chapter. Stay in the moment. Stay on the page that you're reading right now.
Do you have a greatest regret in life?
No.
Okay, so we'll flip the other side of that question. What would people be the most surprised to know about you? Little tidbit, little factoid that nobody really knows until now.
I think cursing is one of the most expressive forms of communication available.
And I know that firsthand 2 nights ago. Long story. Do you have any hobbies other than reading?
I like to travel. I like to travel a lot. Again, everything happens for a reason. There are no accidents. I got the wanderlust very early in life. I've traveled all over the world, and that is an odd look, LeVar. I love travel. I love to travel.
Yeah, you've been on a number of other projects that where either you're like a guest or like the Big Bang Theory you're in, some animated series.
Yeah. Community.
Community. Yeah, talk about some of those other shows and that you've been a part of or worked on or acted or other stuff that maybe people aren't aware of. How was that for you?
Well, one of the good things about having been around so long now is that I'm being asked to come on to popular shows and play myself, which is a huge compliment. Because what it says to me is that there is something about my work, that which I have done these last 35 years, that has some meaning for people, some value. Of all the things that I have done in my life and in my career, I am most proud of Reading Rainbow, and that seems to have touched the accord with those who grew up on the show, and it's a compliment. It's a huge compliment.
You write, you direct, you act, you produce. Which is your favorite?
I like working. I discovered as an actor just how uncomfortable it made me feel sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. So I began to create work for myself. And I felt much more at ease, much more at home. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys sitting around idle unless leisure is the agenda. Otherwise, I feel like I need to be doing something. I need to be active. I need to be engaged. I feel like I've got shit to do in this life, you know?
And there's the cursing aspect. Let's talk about the future for a second as we come here towards the end. What do you hope to be doing 10 years from now?
10 years from now? Sitting on a beach in Barbados. Writing, perhaps, having another career, just really focusing on writing. Perhaps on that piece of property, a compound for young artists to come and study and learn.
So after you're gone, and we've themed out one of these rooms here on campus for you, because you have to be dead for that to happen. What do you want people to say about you after you're gone?
He picked up a book and took a look, but but you didn't have to take his word for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, LeVar Burton.